In the world of professional wrestling, matches that feel this big do not come around often, and that's just down to the fact that this level of importance cannot be fabricated, it must be earned. The best matches in wrestling, the best stories in wrestling, are the ones where you can't tell who's gonna win. So that leads us to the big question. What happens when you get the two baddest dudes in AEW facing off for the World Championship? What happens when the wrestler who was previously considered the best in the world faces off against the wrestler who's currently considered the best in the world? What happens when AEW puts on the biggest match it can right now? Well, you get a match that we've already seen before, but somehow it feels even bigger than the first time. But that's because every major story that has been told in AEW for the past year has all led to this one massive match. This is Tranquilo Club, and this is the highly anticipated rematch between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. On this channel, I've talked a lot about AEW's excellent long-term storytelling, but the story between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega might be the one with the most history in AEW. I mean, these two crossed paths for the very first time on AEW's very first show, and the rest is history. And I've talked about the history between these two wrestlers on multiple videos, and as always, I'll leave a link to those videos in the description below. So what's different about this match this time around compared to their first match at Full Gear 2019? These two have had their characters develop so much since then. Moxley is now the ace of AEW, and Kenny Omega is once again trying to reclaim his place as the ace of a wrestling promotion. Since then, Omega and Moxley have gone to war with certain opponents and even with people they once considered friends earlier in their careers. They've had to do things that they didn't want to in order to reach the top, and in Moxley's case, to stay on top. But ever since Jon Moxley became the AEW World Champion at the expense of Kenny Omega, everyone knew that a rematch between the two was inevitable someday. Jon Moxley is the reason why Kenny Omega's character went into a tailspin and had to turn to Hangman Page to get back on his feet. And we all know how that ended. Jon Moxley might have not caused the split of the Elite, but he certainly fast-tracked it. But what we don't know is if we would have gotten this version of Kenny Omega if it weren't for his tag team with Hangman Page. It wasn't until their run as a tag team came to an end that Kenny Omega said it was time for a clean break, meaning it was now time for the persona that gained them both critical and commercial success in New Japan Pro Wrestling to finally be unleashed in AEW. And that persona is the one we know as the Cleaner. And as soon as Kenny Omega reverted back to his old ways, he started to see success in AEW almost immediately. He would win the AEW World Championship Eliminator Tournament to become the #1 contender by last defeating his former tag team partner Hangman Page. And that's how we got here to the biggest match of 2020. Now for Jon Moxley, you would think that he would see Kenny Omega as just another opponent, as just another challenger for his world title. But he doesn't. I mean, Moxley said it best, beating Kenny Omega once is one thing, but beating him twice takes someone special. But he's that someone special. He respects what Kenny Omega has done, but he still at the end of the day carries himself like a champion, a fighting champion. But the great thing about Jon Moxley is he's not some one-dimensional babyface. If he feels you did him wrong, then he's gonna return the favor, as evidenced by the contract signing that happened for this match over the course of 2 weeks. During what was supposed to be the contract signing for this match, Jon Moxley was found backstage knocked out cold, and Kenny Omega, who didn't seem to care at all about this, would just sign the contract without Jon Moxley being able to sign. Now the next week, we had the continuation of the contract signing in order to get Jon Moxley to do his part. And before Kenny Omega can even leave the tunnel during his big epic entrance, Jon Moxley attacks him from behind. Moxley, who obviously assumed that Omega was the one who attacked him from behind the previous week, returned the favor to Omega. And after this, Jon Moxley cuts an excellent promo while Omega is hurting on the floor, and he tells him if he's gonna win the AEW World Championship, he's gonna have to become the Kenny Omega that he's pretending to be. that if he wants to stand any chance against Moxley, he's gonna have to dig deep to become that Kenny Omega. And everything that Moxley says here rings true. Even Omega himself thinks the only reason he lost to Moxley the first time around was because he had to step into Moxley's world and have a quote-unquote garbage wrestling match. And thus this cocky version of Kenny Omega would tell Jon Moxley in a backstage promo to leave the garbage wrestling at home for their rematch, because on December 2nd he's gonna have to face off against the cleaner and the best bout machine. To Moxley and Omega, this match is about more than just the title. It's about their legacies. Jon Moxley has gone 18 months without being beaten in singles competition. That's absolutely ridiculous. And while Kenny Omega was having an excellent run as a tag team competitor, as a tag team champion, Jon Moxley was overtaking him and becoming the best wrestler in the world. And this is something that the character of Kenny Omega cannot live with. It eats him up inside because he came into AEW as the best wrestler in the world. And here's this guy who comes in from WWE who was being buried on his way out, who overtakes you completely and becomes the hottest name in wrestling today. And not just that, he puts a target on your back the very first night he comes in. And that's what makes the rivalry between Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley so epic. It's the two current best wrestlers in the world going at it for a world championship, but with a long-term story right under it. The story between Moxley and Omega first started 19 months ago when they came face to face for the first time at Double or Nothing 2019. And all their heartbreaks, all their wars, all their victories have all been leading to this moment. This is long-term storytelling at its absolute best, because you could have these two wrestle against each other for the title on any random Dynamite and it would still be a big deal. But without the long brewing story that these two have been telling, it wouldn't be the biggest match in AEW Dynamite's history, and arguably the biggest match in AEW history. And the true beauty of the booking of this match is that either guy can come out of this the winner and you would feel like they earned that win. Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley have been presented as equals in a convincing manner. And that's why you go into this not knowing who's gonna win, because each wrestler has the case to come out the winner. And that's how you create organic intrigue in a match, with long-term storytelling where both men have an equal opportunity to come out victorious. In a match that will surely determine the course of AEW in 2021, the wrestling world will be watching in anticipation as Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega face off on Dynamite for the AEW World Championship.